So, Charles, how are you these days?
Busy. Well, the book is launched, so.
How long did it take for you to publish it, and did you plan it for a long time?
Well, it's been in the back of my head for years, like decades, like Nirvana book. People have said, do it, you should do a Nirvana book. And I'm like, yeah, I don't want to just do a Nirvana book. Because I always thought I always thought of it as almost like a commune, the grunge bands. Like, you can't separate them apart. Then they just become celebrities or rock stars. But I finally decided was about a little over a year and a half. I want to say a year and 9 months now since I really sat down and was like, okay, started editing, came up with a concept, worked with the publisher, and all those steps. The printing was in October in Barcelona.
How did it all go?
Great. Yeah. I mean, we've gotten a lot of good press and feedback. The model that Minor Matters does is pre-sale. So we pre-sold in April of last year, and in 8 hours we were, twice over what you normally have to pre-sale for her to print the book. Sub Pop the other night we sold out. The February 20th was Kurt's birthday, and then so that was the release date. We did it at the Sub Pop bookstore downtown and sold 100 books that night. And
great.
Easy Street Records in West Seattle last Saturday night, and we sold about 100 there. So yeah, it's going well.
How did you become a photographer? Or at least interested in photography?
Yeah, no, I mean, I guess, I just, as a young age, I became interested in just photography as a hobby. A family member was doing it as well. It kind of went into a hobby, and then a fascination, kind of at the same time that I was also fascinated by music. At first, rock and roll. What we now call classic rock, though at the time it was just, whatever was newly released by Led Zeppelin. So it wasn't so classic then. And then into punk. So, and then, through high school and middle school, I did newspaper and yearbook as photographer. And then at the same time in high school, started going to punk shows in the city, and just kept that fascination with music. And at the same time, I became fascinated with art photography, not just photography as journalism or for commercial purposes, but as, artists, particularly, 60s, 70s street photography and the such. And so I wanted to, and then I went to the University of Washington to pursue a Bachelor of Fine Arts in photography, in art photography. So, it just became this, and at the same time, I met all these wonderful musicians, some of them also going to college, Mark Arm, Kim Thale, etc. Bruce Cabot, of course. We were all just kind of college kids doing our thing, and it became this kind of natural mix of I go out and photograph their bands, and we were experimenting. I was doing it for art class, and they were doing it.
It became history.
Yeah, so they were doing it because they wanted to put out a 45 or something, Yeah, you got to start somewhere. You got to start small. I mean, it was pretty vibrant scene of underground artists, because Seattle it hadn't blown up with tech yet, and it was a relatively depressed, kind of older, funkier downtown. So you had clubs like, there was the Metropolis to begin with, which is the all ages club that existed for about a year, and that was a real melting pot of personalities and talents, and bands from everywhere would come through there.
But just a year?
Just a year, yeah, a year and a half, something like that, yeah.
Interesting.
And that was like 83, 84, right around in there. And then you had bands like the U-Men and 10 Minute Warning and all these kind of Skin Yard. Yeah, and these bands that sort of helped make that bridge between what was going on with punk, because we were all into punk and hardcore at one time, and then we were like, oh, wait a minute, like these old Alice Cooper records are pretty cool, these Stooges records, check this out, like, and so there are all these kind of bands that made that bridge, and then of course Green River just like embraced it and took off, and then that factioned out to Mudhoney and Pearl Jam. But yeah, no, it was that like, there were artists and designers and Linda Berry, like cartoonists, and all these like Art Chantry and all these great people here doing stuff. It was kind of like Larry Reed had Roscoe Louis Gallery and I started going to. And yeah, I think if it had just been music, I don't think the scene would be as vibrant as it was really. But it was really all, as many are, it was really all about, the artists as well. Yeah,
of course. I'm always fascinated by that scene, but I never knew that much about the 80s. So I wanted to ask you about Nirvana's success. Was it a big surprise? When did you first meet Kurt Cobain, and what was it like?
Well, I mean, I'd first heard like they had at KCMU, the local radio station. They had what's called a pot, and I DJ'd there at one time, and it's just this like big kind of cassette thing that would have like one song on it or something, or a promo or whatever, and you popped into this machine, and they had like one pot there, I guess, and we would hear it quite often, especially late at night on the radio. There was a couple DJs, and when I was working in the darkroom at this job I had, and it was Floyd the Barber, which is one of their weird songs. It's not like, oh
yeah.
But I was like, oh my God, that song is so weird and kind of so annoying at the same time. But it's like so annoying, but I really find it fascinating. So it had this like, okay. And then of course, flash forward, and the first time Nirvana played in Seattle at the Vogue, I was there and I didn't photograph them, and I just didn't think much of them. So I didn't, I was like, okay, I actually left early. Like, okay. Then like Jonathan and Bruce were like, well, fucking check out their like a cassette of their album that they'd recorded with Indino. And I was like, oh.
You are talking about the people who were from Sub Pop, right?
Sub Pop, yeah. And so they played me Bleach, and I was like, holy crap, like, wow. And then the next time I saw Nirvana was at the February of '89 at the UW Hub Ballroom, where they opened for, I don't know, The Fluid and Tad or something. And so that was this seemed an entirely different band that I'd seen at the Vogue.
Oh, really?
Just in there. I think Kurt was really nervous that night or something. I don't know. Or they had a different drummer, and they didn't. They had Jason Everman as well that night.
The second time, right?
The second time, yeah.
But was it the Chad Channing there, or
Chad, yeah.
He's a great drummer. I mean, I must say that whatever.
Yeah.
I love Dave, but Chad did a great job for me at least.
Yeah, yeah, no, he was. I thought he was a perfectly acceptable drummer. So yeah.
Yeah. Was Mudhoney already like in the?
Yeah. So Mudhoney and Soundgarden and we're already kind of making a little bit of a name for themselves.
In underground circles, right?
Yeah. So Nirvana were kind of not latecomers, but
a bit.
Really, yeah, kind of, yeah. They were latecomers. Yeah.
Before I forget, I must ask you one thing. Does Mark Harm still work in Sub Pop?
He does, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, he's still in the warehouse. Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
Mudhoney are heroes to me. I mean, too. I mean, I love them. They are so down to earth, but they are so cool people. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, so Mark is probably my oldest friend from that scene.
Oh.
I mean, I met Mark in 1982, fall of 1982, in the dormitories at the University of Washington. So,
that's a long time.
I was like, oh, who's this dude with a shaved head and a Crass t-shirt on? You know, it was like, hey man, you want it in the cafeteria? I was like, hey, what's up? You know, crazy.
Did you know Chris Cornell well?
No, not well. No, but you know, again, like he's just one of those guys that I met like just at a house party. Like I don't even think he was in Soundgarden yet. Maybe Kim had just, I remember something, or Kim had just been, oh, you got to meet our new singer or something, like our singer. So, I don't know, but it was just, and it was just, yeah, he was just this dude, like really fucking gorgeous dude who but we just just met at a house party and drank beer and wrestled around and to the Pixies. I don't know. Yeah, no, just crazy. Yeah.
What was it like hearing out Soundgarden in the beginning of the 90s or end of the 80s? What was it like? That was so powerful. I mean, whatever happened afterwards, but that was so honest, so powerful. I don't see any musical scene being like that strong again, at least not for a long time.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of reasons for that. Just this certain melting pot of talent, I guess, and again, including photographers and producers and designers and record people who knew how to sort of, like Bruce and John of Sub Pop, who knew how to essentially brand things on an underground sort of level to take it overground. So and again, because it was pre-internet, now you just can't, everything is so quickly disseminated and diffused. And so in retrospect, it's sort of like, oh yeah, like Nirvana went out on the road for their first tour in a van, and Sub Pop didn't have the money to have their record Bleach actually kept in print. So they went out, and wherever they went, none of the record stores had their record,
Wow.
So they could
I didn't know that.
They were just pissed off as hell. But in retrospect, maybe that actually made them more valuable too. You gotta
mystery.
That suffering and mystery and rarity and scarcity. I mean, maybe living on top ramen is actually should be a luxury item for making art. I don't know. But yeah, so I mean, it's always hard to like there are certain dramas that were mixed up in it that,
Yeah,
retrospect, you wish
of course.
weren't, or you try and forget about. But it was really, I mean, I saw, Soundgarden, 85, like, I think I was at their second ever show, probably. It's like, wow, like what, like, where did that come from? Yeah. Because it was a little bit it was like, there was some metal in there, but it wasn't metal, and there was like some little bit of like funk and soul in there. And
Yeah,
I mean, even I think like that, like the thing about Nirvana was that for what, like, as heavy as in a way it is, it was also like with Chris's bass and Chad and then Dave's drum, it was very danceable, or that there was a melody there, no matter if, like, Kurt was singing about Mexican seafood or something. There was something like you could connect to. Like Tad is amazing and great, but way too heavy for just kind of beyond hard rock.
they are heavy. Great band, but yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, but it was like, it was for dilettantes. Whereas like Kurt like embraced and understood that sense of melody that perhaps bands like the Beatles and whatnot had, and how to sort of do that in a really natural way. Right, we had a lot of time on our hands up here, let's put it that way. And I mean, that's like that, like, I kind of say that flippantly, but that is somewhat true. And like one of the and I read something about it recently, I've been thinking about, like, one of the like most unheralded portions of all of Nirvana's history, and probably one of the most important, was when Kurt and Chris and Dave like all went down to Olympia and just like hid out for like 6 months or whatever, and played in this warehouse and just like worked and like suffered the cold and didn't have any money, and weren't playing many gigs, and they just really hammered out the craft and the songs, and you kind of had the time to do that stuff. I mean, it's hard now, like, I mean, just yeah,
it's so fast, everything. And
everything like has to happen so fast now.
Yeah, it has to, like, but certainly that did a lot of things there. So I mean, they were so tight as a band. Like you said, they were danceable, but like Nirvana was like melodic and punk, but in a really good way. Like California way.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you about for your career as a photographer, what happened next?
Yeah, I mean, so at a certain point there, there were like so much focus on Seattle that not only were there all these local bands that were popping up and needing photography, and a lot of them wanted to work with me, but then there were publications outside of Seattle looking for photographs of the more famous bands or whoever, wanting to illustrate pieces. So kind of working at both of those levels. Unfortunately, for whatever reason, the famous bands never hired me. But anyway, I did just go to them. So I don't know how that. I guess it all worked out in the end. And so that went on kind of through the 90s, really. Yeah. And then now it's primarily I shoot other personal art stuff, but as far as music goes, it's mostly it's mostly just archive work, print sales, and
So you worked with Pearl Jam recently, or am I wrong?
well, I mean, that was 2018 was the last time I worked.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but I'm gonna go shoot some stuff on this tour, definitely. Like,
They're going on a tour. I didn't know that.
yeah. So I think they're playing in Seattle in May or something.
Can I ask you about when Kurt died?
Mhm.
The whole world felt that. So I presume it was really changing things and noticeable in Seattle. So what happened then?
Yeah, I mean, it was a shockwave for sure. But I mean, at the same time, I think that you know, it didn't mean that like everyone else's work was canceled or it couldn't continue on, you know. So yeah, it probably took on, and I think at that point, like Nirvana took on like some larger than life proportions. But it was a time for regrouping and kind of reevaluating. I think for some people, priorities and whatnot. But ultimately, I mean, it went on. I think a couple of years later, I toured with Pearl Jam around Europe, and so
it was a No Code tour, right? Or
the No Code tour, yeah.
So what was it like with those guys afterwards through Europe? Did you know them well before?
Yeah, of course. I'd known Stone and Jeff from the early '80s. Green River, and Jeff was in a band called Deranged Diction. Yeah, I mean, we used to just skateboard together back in the day. Jeff and I.
So cool.
Yeah, him and Bruce Fairweather. Yeah, Montana Transplants. So I knew those guys. I didn't, I hadn't worked with them too much in that capacity, but here it shows here and there through the years, and but yeah, I never traveled with them before, and it was a pretty natural fit. I think got along well, and it was Eddie and I played a lot of Scrabble. That was our bag, and it was fun. I mean, it was great. Like, when I got to Prague, the night before the first show I was going to shoot with them, they'd already been touring for a bit, and Eddie and I met in the bar, and he was just like up front, like, I want you to feel comfortable doing, pretty much anything you need to do, and going anywhere you need to go, and all that. But I guess I would often surprise the stage crew by just like popping up here and there, running over there. They're like, Jesus, like, they're all like, God, you're quick. Like, it's almost to run after you. Like, it's Charles again.
I couldn't imagine that. I mean, you grew up through that as a person and as an artist. So how did your perspective change through time? I mean, so much things happened in like 5 years back then, so fast. So I presume your perspective on life and everything and art changed.
Yeah, no, I mean, most certainly. And there's, I mean, I think that's just one would hope would be the arc of life, is that you become more wise, and, maybe not if you're a Trump supporter, but and it's an opposite dip. I mean, there are definitely like things I know now as a photographer and an artist that I certainly wish I'd had more like insight at that time. I think too, I think what happened also was that after the like in the late starting in the late 90s and kind of through the 2000s, I started shooting like other non-music stuff, and that sort of forced me to, well, kind of take what I was doing in music, and put it into other, subjects and views, and consequently, what I learned from those experiences, I wish I had been able to take into the music stuff.
Did you ever wish you were into the film and cinema?
Yeah, I mean, I dabbled in some video back in the day. I had a local filmmaker convince me to be the DP on a low budget 16 millimeter film here, and that was just one of the worst experiences of my life. I'm a huge film fanatic, and always have been through the years, of course, cinema, and yeah, but it's just a whole different set of tools and responsibilities, and I don't know. I think it's a big one, and I don't feel quite the ownership that I do when I'm shooting stills.
I know what you mean.
It's weird. It's because it is such a collaborative, and I don't mind the fact that, but it is like the beauty and the mystery and the talent, the skill, the luck, whatever, in making a single image that kind of is an entire movie in and of itself. You know what I mean? Versus that 24 frames every second is moving through the world. Right. It's just a different mindset. I don't think one is better than the other.
That's why I asked, because I have noticed you always had that cinematic feel through your photographs, and so I mean,
even I'm shooting these days. I'm shooting mostly landscapes or skyscapes, as I call them, and it's very much that kind of where you have this kind of huge dramatic sky, and then right down almost like a bug, like there's a jet plane or something,
I love that,
using that sense of scale and where they're beautiful, but they can be a little bit dark too. So that I always wanted to aim for that beauty. It wasn't just about the power or the chaos or the sweat or whatever, but it was also and that I achieved through how I used lighting, how I would make the print after the fact. So it's not too many photographers that aren't artists. They just think that you can just sort of, I took a photo, it represents what they took, and press send, and it's it represents, but it represents the subject, but it doesn't represent an emotion or the subject. There's nothing for other people to.
So you were talking about skyscaping, sense of scale.
That's something I've always I guess you could say I'm more attracted to the negative space and what that tells you in a photo than the positive. And it's also in a way why I'm attracted to photos of the person's eyes closed, it's almost more than, I don't know, I kind of like doing, I like upending rules or stereotypes or cliches or whatever you want to call them. But yeah, I think that's what pushes vision forward, is not sort of, is working through that stuff. I call it a minefield of cliches. Whenever I approach a project, you always have to, any good artist, it's been done before, so you have to walk through that if you want to make it a unique vision of your own, whether it be music photography or I've done a whole series on my children. Like, who cares about other people's children? But you got to find those images in that path that like makes it universal, makes it speak to other people, and beyond the subject. I mean, the best compliments that I've had about my work are from people that know nothing about Nirvana or grunge or rock and roll, but do know, say, about photography or what art, whatnot. So, it's that, finding that universal theme and that will speak to others. That's, I think, I find most important.
Yeah, so you're saying that you had to like go through some like period of exploring the.
Yeah, no, I went to like Vietnam for a number of trips, shooting, doing some travel. Like, I just kind of wanted to prove to myself that like, I can take some great photos and enjoy doing it, some beyond the sort of the music scene.
Of the famous stuff.
The fame, the fame and all that. And so and it just it gets pretty burned out. You get pretty burned out, or at least I did on it after a while. I've also unfortunately suffered from migraines my whole life. So that becomes pretty hard in a rock and roll environment too.
Oh yeah, that's a bummer.
Travel and having that, like, when you're on a photo shoot, like a big photo shoot, you're like at the point of the pyramid, and there's this whole, like, everything like depends on you.
Yeah,
it's a pretty stressful job.
I wanted to ask you about it. Yeah.
So I kind of did some travel and like I said, and then in the mid 2000s, I did a book on breakdancing. I shot, that came out in 2008, called Cypher, and that was great experience too. And again, just something I did on my own, just going to local clubs in Seattle, and then doing a couple trips to New York and LA, and shooting it again a challenge, shooting it on medium format film, which is the larger square or rectangular film that you only get 12 or 24 per roll, typically 12. And it makes for a very nice, big, detailed negative, and more of a traditional, almost like studio look, even though you're out in the live environment. And not easy when all this madness is going on at these breakdance competitions, and you have this great big bulky camera and flash, and then every 12 photos you have to put in this new paper roll and wind it on and stuff. It would have been much easier at that time to go in with one of the new digital SLRs that were coming out and bang 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 away. But again, it's like I needed to find an artistic path through it, and like I wanted to portray them as dancers portray dancers, luscious black and white, with like Barbara Morgan in the 40s or something. And kind of an extension of the grunge thing too. So I mean, like this new series I'm shooting, it's called Photographs for Ambient Music.
Really?
So kind of a play off the Brian, because I've been into ambient music and whatnot these last few years, especially. But even back in like 1983, Mark Arm and I, we'd listen to a Black Flag record or a Stooges record, and then we'd also listen to a Brian Eno or a Can record too.
Really?
Yeah. So we're like music nerds. Like I listen to
Course.
classical, I listen to jazz, I listen to everything as long as it's great music with great intention,
Of
and
course.
moves me somehow. Yeah. Uh, so
So please tell me more about that and about the new series. It sounds so good, and I must confess I'm too into that more now than before.
uh
Into ambiental
Yeah,
music.
so like there's a few parameters. One thing I'm using a Leica M10, and I'm using a
Leica,
130
did you say?
Leica, yeah, a digital with a color with a 135 millimeter lens, which is more of a telephoto lens,
Okay.
and not very commonly used with the Leica, but it allows me to just like kind of like, yeah, frame up the environment and make it something that it isn't. Like now when I put on a wide angle lens, it's like, oh, it looks like an iPhone shot. Whereas this is like, uh, and I've been involving airplanes and birds and various stuff just to kind of set the scene. I have a wonderful shot that I took a while back of a whole kind of irregular line of geese, like maybe 100, 50 of them flying off into the
I'm not sure
distance.
did I see it.
Yeah,
Can we see it somewhere? Did you?
I have occasionally posted some. I'll send you some. I'll send you a few JPEGs here, but
Please.
yeah. And yeah, so it's just something I do when I walk the dog in the neighborhood. Uh, and I often will portray airplanes as like dramatically coming through the clouds, almost like that little sense of danger, you know?
Yeah.
It's like when I was a child, I wanted to be a jet pilot. Uh,
Really?
yeah,
That's so interesting. I mean,
yeah. So it kind of speaks to that. It also speaks to where we're at in our environment and about how like actually like there's this huge drama like constantly unfurling above us, in the
yeah.
atmosphere. And but we're all kind of often so stuck on our phones or these days we don't even notice it. And there's some like crazy phenomena that happens uh out there if you just kind of like, keep looking. It's always photography is always about looking and looking
Yeah.
and looking and picking something and looking and looking,
Yeah.
and taking 100,000 photos and then eventually boiling it down to like 60 or 70. Yeah, like making a very fine sauce.
Uh, I was following you for, some of your shares on Facebook last 2 years, so I saw that scenery. There's so much that speaks. Can you tell me more about that series you are preparing? How do you merge it with ambiental music, or do you take
Okay, yeah.
inspiration?
Yeah, no, that's just kind of so it's kind of like taking the trope and turning it backwards. Um, you know, that somehow like that somehow the photographs will inform the music versus the music or
Oh,
that the music. I don't know, but anyway, I've got kind of an idea, and I've been building a playlist, and I think I'm just going to sort of randomly assign a song or an artist and a song, or an album or whatever to an image, in the final selection. And some will kind
cool.
of, and
Very
again,
cool.
it's like it doesn't. There's no literacy in ambient, or and
Yeah.
it will be everything from like Cluster to Andre 3000 to
Yeah.
um, Eno, and on. So, yeah.
So
A lot of
interesting.
lot of different krautrock, kind of Popol Vuh, that sort of thing.
Oh
Uh,
yeah, yeah,
yeah, and not just like drone ambient sort of, but like yeah, but that mood, that music that creates these moods,
yeah,
that
yeah. I
kind
get
of
it.
go with that kind of stark stillness,
Yeah,
or
stillness, right?
royalty. Yeah,
The
yeah.
thing you said just before, we always need to keep looking, struck me. So, and I remember the question I had. It's like a bit hilarious, but because you said also you wanted to be a pilot when you were. My father was a pilot, and I was all my life obsessed with flying and with. But I became musician,
Uh-huh.
so I'm still obsessed with that and with photography too. What do you think about these new things in like American politics and about ufology? What do you think is behind all that?
With UFOs.
Yeah.
Um, oh man, I haven't really kept the. I mean, when I was younger, I read a lot of UFO stuff, and yeah, I was pretty convinced. I don't know. I mean, um, it's possible. I just don't know why they would keep crashing. If they have such amazing technology, I don't know why they would keep crashing though. That's the only
Yeah. Yeah. That's a
um
tricky one. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, there's definitely some difficulty explaining
Yeah. Yeah.
stuff there. Um, but yeah, I mean, I don't know, like the whole like ancient cross culture uh thing, or aliens. I don't know. I think that there's I don't I think that we need to look. I think that we're not taking. I think saying that like, oh, aliens came down and like guided these various ancient. I don't think we're giving the ancient cultures enough tradition, enough. Uh,
Attention.
well, yeah, we're not giving them enough credit for what they could do themselves.
Yeah.
If you know what I mean. So
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, I think the ancient traditions, cultures were sometimes pretty amazing. But I've taken a lot of. At one point in my life, I took a lot of ayahuasca. So I'm kind of aware of that, like how energy can work, and spirit energy sometimes, and in
Yeah.
that way.
That's strange sometimes. Yeah.
It
Yeah.
is. I mean, the very first time I took ayahuasca, and the very first thing that I saw was this vision that was starting in the, kind of overlaid with the room, of this kind of the bas relief carving of a like kind of ancient South American. I didn't know really what it was, but it was a profile and that sort of as carved
Wow.
in stone, but
And the
just a
first
huge
time.
pattern of it. And then later I went and I saw the exact same thing in a book. It's a book I'd never seen before, and it was a pre-Incan shaman carving. So yeah, so I think that there's a whole world of energy out there that, like, if you can allow yourself to access it and tap into it and download it, and that's what that's what that's what the shamans do, whether it be an ayahuasca shaman or a Tibetan lama.
Yeah.
That's kind of, yeah, I believe in that.
That's so interesting. I mean, and you didn't even see that before, so
No, no.
strange. How could we explain that? So
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, for
mysterious,
sure.
amazing.
Mhm.
I was. I mean, yeah. I'm interested in many things. McKenna was exploring things you were talking about right now,
Mhm.
but yeah, I wanted to ask you What camera do you use aside of that one you told us about? Like a
Yeah, well, back in the day, I used film Nikons with primarily a 24 millimeter lens, a fairly wide lens, but not super wide. And yeah, and nowadays, I mostly use Leicas for the M10 for most everything.
Can you tell me why? Because I don't know much about Leica and
Yeah, no, I mean, Leicas it's a rangefinder, like, so you're actually not seeing, you're just seeing a patch that gives you frame lines, and then there's a little patch for focus. So you're not actually seeing what the final photo looks like. And I find I like it. It gives me a sense of looseness, and the lenses are very small but very high quality.
oh
And yeah, it's really about the whole reason people, primarily it started with street photographers in the 60s and journalists. You know, they like the compactness and the sometimes the invisibility of them. Yeah, I mean, you know, but like a great big huge show or something, I would certainly pull out the Nikon and a long telephoto lens to have along as well. They can't do everything.
yeah.
But a lot of photographers will find Leicas difficult because it's all manual. It's all manual focus. I use no matter the camera, I use manual exposure. Doesn't even with my big autofocus Nikons, I generally use manual focus.
Yeah.
So yeah, just because the camera, like,
You can trust it.
yeah, I can't trust it. I mean, I'd rather it be me screwing up the focus or the exposure than the camera screwing it up, you know?
Well said. Yeah.
Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah, at least that whatever, there's like some intention there on my part. I don't know, maybe it looks really cool but the camera just, yeah, and the focus thing I always found frustrating because I love to isolate people and put them with, in between stuff, or I don't know.
Yeah. I noticed that. I was just looking at some of your photos these days.
Yeah, or you put them I've got this one photo of, like, Eddie Vedder from the No Code tour that when I showed him, it's just him way down in a corner and all blackness of the auditorium and the rest of it. And he looks at it and he's like, wow, I never thought about it like that before. So yeah, but like you have to know your f-stops and shutter speeds and just kind of have that all dialed in your head. Yeah. So yeah, so you can just be quick about it and move on to other things like making dramatic compositions or whatever. Yeah. Now, of course, digital is super easy. Like anyone that, like, you got instant feedback. Like if you're wrong, you're wrong. Like you just quickly fix it. So, yeah, but still, like I still shoot it like as if I was shooting slides or something, and you just have to know your exposure and get it right. Yeah.
So I wanted to ask you, I mean, maybe one more thing about those technicalities. What about Hasselblads? I know they're like a super quality. They have super quality, but I don't know, they're so expensive. And are they worth it?
Yeah, but you can get really close. Like you're talking about the newer digital, like the X2D or something. I used to shoot film Hasselblads back in the day. And in fact, I have a tattoo of one even.
Wow.
But
it's more interesting to me, definitely.
Yeah, but it's just the film Hasselblads. They take the big square negative. It just was more of a studio for pose stuff way of working, and of course, I ultimately then transpose that to using it for breakdancing. But Yeah, no, I mean, they're just different tools with slightly different looks and ways of haptics, like, ways of working. So
What would you say to like maybe somebody like me who is, let's say, or probably someone younger that is a beginner in photography? What would be your advice? Something that crossed your mind first?
yeah, I think that I think it's important to not get too, you got to stay loose. I think more and more, like, you got to get loose with your photography if you want it to be expressive. Like, um unless your total intention is for it to, say, be this perfect, and then make it perfect, but don't like make it like, oh, because we're living in this day and age where, like, you could make a pretty goddamn perfect image with your phone. So you really kind of need to move beyond that, and find it, and try and find a vision and work through it for a while too, some consistency. It's really often about consistency, and not showing everything all the time.
Yeah.
Save it back so that when you do show it, it has more impact, or you've edited it down, or you've come through some process where, like, oh my God, like, that all that stuff I shot for the 6 months I just need to, like, never see it again. But I found this one thing that is now moving me forward, in the
Yeah.
project. Yeah, it's important to sort of, yeah, take time and edit, and editing. That's huge. Yeah.
And time consuming, right? Yeah.
I mean, it's a huge, it's most of photography is editing, really. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought so.
You can take a half-hour Nirvana show, and then I literally could have spent the next 25 years, 30 years editing that, So there was, like,
Wow.
yeah, a lot more time is spent in editing and post, and how you work with those images than it is when you're actually taking them, Sure, it might take a long time to build up a body of work, but the actual time photographing compared to the time spent doing, making those photos come out into the world
Of course.
but people forget about that, and it's a really important part of the process.
Yeah, I get that. I asked you in the beginning, how long did it take for you to your book about Nirvana photographs you made? Why now? And it just clicked, right?
Well, it's because I needed to find it took me too long, or far too long, I guess, to sort of recognize how I was going to present them to the world. And I was always wary of making, oh God, like another Nirvana band book, or this, or like, oh, here's the Nirvana book, like cashing in on Nirvana kind of thing. And so I really their story has just been told over and over again. And there's been, I've obviously been photographed by hundreds of photographers. So I really needed to figure out that thread. And to me, it was like coming back to the music, and having the, like, family going out of town, and having 2 weeks to run prints all throughout the house and throw on the music constantly, and just kind of, and then come up with the idea of, like, oh, let's essentially break it up with song titles, and into kind of sections, and then it was still big, and then my editor or publisher, she got on it, and she's got an incredible eye, and so at that point, then we kind of jettisoned there was a whole section for pose pictures and there was a section for backstage, and we got rid of those. And really it's like taking a dozen shows and making one show out of it. So it has that power of, you know, of Nirvana, like the way that their music propels forward. The book does that too, and it's like people say, like, oh my God, they're like exhausted by the end of it, going through it. That was the idea. So
can't wait to see it.
Yeah.
How can people get to the book? Can you tell us?
Minor Matters is the publisher. And I wish I could remember, but there's a bookstore in Berlin and there's a bookstore in Dublin selling it. So I wish I had that information. If I can get it to you, I need to get that from her anyway. People keep asking.
Yeah.
If you want to avoid EU, like have less EU shipping costs, that will be the way. Yeah.
Okay. Good to know. Charles, thank you so much for this and
You're
taking
welcome.
the time. I really hope we will talk again.
Oh yeah. More books for the future. Yes.
Yeah. I wish you good luck in everything you do and good health. And I wish you all the best. And please send me those JPEGs.
Okay, yeah. All right.
See you.
Thank you.